The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings and welcome to the latest in a series of Continuent webinars. We appreciate you attending and thank you. Today we're going to be discussing some very interesting global scaling concepts. A brief bit of housekeeping as we get started. This webinar should last approximately 30 minutes in 3 sections. The first is talking about our customer use case today. What about them? Who are they? How does it work? And why did they actually choose what they chose as their solution? Next, we'll start to cover the Continuent benefits, how the product fits in, and finally at the end we'll have an extensive Q&A. So please do save all of your questions for the end. If you want to put them into the question area of the GoToWebinar control panel, you may certainly do so. And when we hit the Q&A session, we will answer them in order for as much time as we have available. Anything that does not get answered today, we will do follow-ups and everyone will get a copy of both question and answer from everyone. This webinar will be recorded and is currently in progress. Thank you, and let's move on. So, in my opinion, this is the key slide. Right here, we're going to talk about exactly what does it take to make MySQL live across the globe and fulfill all of these particular criteria, right? So architecturally, if we want to design a super database system, we want it to be available anywhere we put it. That means in any region across the globe, in any data center. We want the data to arrive in all of its destinations as quickly as possible, the single view of the data. We want data integrity, we want data consistency, and that leads us to, of course, full ACID compliance, right? Atomic ops, guarantee consistency, isolation, and durability. So with that, we also want to make sure that the application performs quickly, fast local response times, right? So if we can place the database local to the app that's calling for that information, it's going to respond more rapidly, and therefore you'll have a more consistent customer experience, and then the customer is going to be happier because your app is running quickly. Additionally, we want to ensure availability. So we want to have local, automated, rapid failover in the event of a database loss on the write master. Next, we want to be able to take that write master role, pick it up, and move it into a different region for either testing, disaster recovery, maintenance. For whatever reason you want to move that role, we can do it. We want to do it. Next, we need to be able to see and administer all of these resources from anywhere in the world. We need to be able to affect change and to be able to see the state of all of the various layers and pieces. So those are the design criteria that we're going to get into as we go through the webinar. So we want to be able to give you a system and an understanding that allows you to accomplish everything we just spoke about. So with the Tungsten product, we of course are dealing in the MySQL realm, and when we talk about MySQL, we're talking about MySQL Community, MySQL Enterprise, MariaDB, Percona Server, and various offerings from various cloud providers like Amazon's RDS MySQL and RDS Aurora, Google's Cloud SQL, and so forth. So today, we're going to talk about a specific use case that we call Geo Scale MySQL for global operations. This topology is active passive, which means there is a single single write master across all regions. We have other topologies that would allow for active-active, like multi-master, where you could write into each region. But today's use case, we talk about the active-passive model. And it's very deliberate that it was chosen. So let's talk about the who. Riot Games. I'll bet many of you have heard of League of Legends. It's a very, very big, very enjoyable multiplayer game, and they have approximately 80 million players. And then, of course, all of the various Riot Games products and properties, they have several 100 million player accounts. So there are some inherent challenges in maintaining player account data worldwide with that many different accounts. So let's look at what we're really trying to accomplish here. Just to repeat, again, we want to be able to deliver the data close to the audience, close to the application user. And we want that to be as quick as possible, both in replication as well as access for the application locally. And finally, and one of the key reasons that Riot Games chose an active-passive model was that they want a single consolidated view of the data. And so they found that it was much simpler to have a golden single master than it was to try and consolidate active writes across 4 different regions. Got highly complicated very, very quickly. Conflict resolution was difficult. With a single golden master, you have none of those issues. Everyone writes to a single place. Now, this could be a bit of a problem, of course, if you have high writes. But in fact, this particular account subscription management system is very low writes, very high reads. And so it fits perfectly into the active-passive model. So as you can see here, we've got 4 regions: US West 1, US East 1, APAC North 1, and EMEA North 1, effectively 4 different global regions running in Amazon. How are we going to solve this? How are we going to actually get data from that single golden master out to each of the individual regions fast enough and well enough to be able to serve the client applications locally in each region? Well, so here's the architecture. We start out with the primary active cluster in US West 1. It has this green node at the top and 2 blue nodes, so that's a writable master and 2 read slaves. And then in the other 3 regions, we have this orange node, which we call a relay. And so all writes are sent to this green node in the primary cluster. And then these relays are responsible for pulling the data from the primary cluster and distributing it to its local slaves. So there would be 3 active pulls from the main region, and they would be writing to their local slaves. It's highly efficient across the WAN. And so what we get here is a very easy to deploy, because it's effectively plug and play, and yet you get to distribute your data all over the world. Now, the secret sauce here is what we call the connector. And the connector is an intelligent proxy which sits in between the application and the database nodes, and is responsible for automatically routing writes where they belong, here to the primary master, and reads locally to the read slaves in each region. So the connector's intelligence allows for this model to work extremely well. That concept is called read affinity, right? So an application server in US East 1 is going to prefer a read slave in US East 1 to get its data. So it's got a US East 1 read affinity. but all writes will automatically get sent back to the primary master. We also have a portion of the product called the dashboard. It runs in an HTML5 web browser, and it uses our API to obtain various state data about each of the clusters. And if you look here, I know it may be a little hard to see, but we have the global service, which is a cluster of clusters, and that's how we do this multi-region solution. And then within that global cluster of clusters is each region, APAC, EMEA, US East, and US West, each with 3 nodes in place to allow for maintenance and failover. And all activities can be accomplished through the GUI, not just read-only, but you can perform all of the command line style administration that you would normally perform using ccTLR and trepctl, and the entire grouping of commands can all be accomplished here through a GUI. Unfortunately, this is just an image, or I could demo a few of those moving pieces. So let's talk about exactly how we got to that point. Briefly, Continuent is what we bill as the MySQL availability company. Our goal is to provide distributed availability across any number of regions, any number of nodes, and we have currently in play many, many very large organizations with billions of transactions per day, and that is not an exaggeration. Across our various customer realm, there have many different vertical industries with vast amounts of transaction and literally billions of dollars of revenue. And these solutions allow for much, much lower downtime. No solution is ever perfect, but the Continuent solutions, they give you some interesting key benefits, which I'm going to cover in just a few minutes. We've been building software for over 15 years. We were acquired by VMware briefly, and then we spun back off in 2016, over 2 years ago, and we continue to happily serve our customers. They've been very pleased with us. Our average customer stays with us longer than 5 years, so we must be doing something right for them. Here's a list of some of the companies that trust us with their data and their business, and as you can see, we have some fairly well-known names. I'm not going to dwell here too long. All right, here we go. So what do we really have to offer you? We have 2 main generally available products, Tungsten Clustering and Tungsten Replicator. Shortly, Tungsten Cloud will be released, where we will be offering all of these services in a DBaaS, or database as a service sort of delivery method. But for today, Tungsten Clustering gives you all of the high availability. It works whether you're on premise, whether you're in a cloud. It works across clouds. It works between data centers and clouds. I could hook it up between Azure, Google, Amazon, and your local physical data center. We are platform agnostic. So we provide, again, high availability and disaster recovery, as well as that really cool local read affinity, which provides significant performance. So you get highly available continuous ops, scalability, local reads, and a lot of happy customers. Then, when you've got all of your data running smoothly and protected, that's typically in the OLTP world, we have Tungsten Replicator, which allows us to take that OLTP data out of MySQL and deliver it into analytics environments that are not MySQL, whether that be Amazon's Redshift, Cassandra, Vertica, Elasticsearch. We can take those events and format them in such a way that we can even put them on a Kafka bus And then you can consume those events in any way that you want. And we have many customers using the replicator in many, many different ways to replace ETL, for example, where instead of requiring a long, painful overnight ETL batch, you can implement Tungsten Replicator and have real-time analytics and have materialized views that are happening every, say, 5 minutes. So decision support becomes up to the minute, not up to the day. And that drives a heck of a lot of good business decisions. So again, that's Tungsten Clustering for HA and DR, scaling and high performance reads. We've got Replicator to let you move that data out into other areas so that you can use it better and leverage your hardware and your environment in a better way. And ultimately, all of these things will be offered through Tungsten Cloud, which should be coming up sometime this year. So what we have here is called a plumbing slide. And with Tungsten Clustering, we've got continuous MySQL ops, zero downtime. Well, if you want to take a node down for maintenance, if you have 3 nodes, you've still got a master, a failover candidate slave, and now you've got this 3rd slave, which is now offline, getting rebooted, having a hard disk replaced, and yet you still have high availability. So we provide significant uptime. I've spoken about the fact that it's cross-cloud, cross-data center. The connector is that intelligent MySQL proxy that routes the data appropriately. Right? We have high-performance replication that can use parallel apply channels. And it talks MySQL. So there's very little, if anything, that you have to do to your application to make use of this technology. And of course, we've got the dashboard to help visualize all of the layers. For the use case that we're discussing today, the active-passive model, or what's called Tungsten Composite Clustering, active-passive, allows for multiple clusters to live in multiple regions with one-way replication. We also offer composite active-active, where not only would this node be writable, but so would this relay. It would turn green and you could write here as well, and replication would go both ways, or 3 ways, or 4 ways. But that's a much, much more complex sort of deployment. And as it turns out, for this particular company, they started thinking about active-active and moved to the active-passive model when they realized just how simple and easy it was to implement with no application changes, no conflicts in the data, and it just worked. So that's why we choose the composite active-passive topology. Tungsten Replicator, as discussed, moves data from a cluster to an external target, and we have many of them. All right, key benefits. So we're going to move relatively quickly through this. Your handouts, which are attached to the GoToWebinar, contain all of this information, and I encourage you to download the PDF and review this in more detail. But key benefits are, again, continuous operations. If a master fails, it fails over automatically. If you want to switch to another region entirely, it's a single command for active-passive, and it's automatic for active-active. So you're already there. Zero downtime. Same thing. You want to make sure that your customers always have access to your data. Right? You can do pretty much anything you need to inside your cluster just by shutting a node, take it out of service, do what you need to do, and welcome it back in. We have a variety of topologies, active-active, active-passive. Active-active we call multi-master, right? So we have offerings across the board. The connector intelligent MySQL proxy is highly configurable, can speak to multiple clusters, whether they be independent or in fact inside of a composite, And we have the ability to filter and change data in flight. So things like munging PII and changing schema names and regexing changes to the data can all be done with simple JavaScript filters. So there's a vast, vast amount of flexibility within the product at all the layers. Some of the best parts are, well, you're going to save money because your efforts are going to be decreased. Your downtime is going to be decreased, which means you have better uptime and happier customers, and you're not losing money. As stated earlier, you just plug this thing in. We talk MySQL protocol. Your app probably won't even notice we're there. And I think one of the most telling things of all is that we have the world's best support. You can be pretty much guaranteed response time in under 5 minutes for any urgent issue, and for most everything else, probably less than 10. You're getting very serious players with decades of experience, not minutes. And I'd say if you were to count up the years of experience in the organization, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of years of experience supporting MySQL and clustering and networking and all of the topics necessary to make sure that your business is successful when doing these activities. So when you call in, you're not getting some first line person, you're getting a serious tier 3 player to help you out with your stuff. So what have we spoken about? You're covering your data, you're covering your business, you're saving money in terms of maintenance and support. You get to move your data in real time. Your costs actually end up dropping, and we've got your back 24/7, 365 worldwide. And every customer you see here in this slide will rely upon us for just that. So if you're interested, you can reach out to us. We have many docs. We have many people that are interested in speaking with you. And I think at this point, we can move into the Q&A portion of our presentation. So I see a question. Does Continuent offer any Docker containers? No. However, Tungsten does run very well within Docker. And in fact, it's quite interesting that you asked this question for this use case. As it turns out, this particular customer, moving a little quickly there, Riot Games, had started their deployment of Tungsten clustering inside of Docker. And after 6 months or so, they decided that Docker was a little too limiting for a database clustering layer, and they moved out of Docker onto EC2. So today, those servers look like that. We have VPCs between the regions. These are R4.8 extra large with encrypted SSD, BS, and 10 gig network to enable them to support the level of traffic that they have to support. So they moved away from Docker for performance and all of the restrictions that Docker bring, the way it handles disk, and so forth. Does that answer your question, Harim? Very good. Is there anybody else who has a question today? Going once? Going twice? All right, then we can wrap the webinar. I'll thank you all for joining us. Again, I would encourage you to download the PDF handout and to get in touch with us with any questions that you may have. We are open for proof of concept and for demos. I see another question here. What is the licensing model? Typically for these deployments, we license per node, so not per CPU, per node. Often that means per database node. So if it's running MySQL D, then it's one license. We often suggest that the connector proxy be installed on the application server directly and not on the database node. There is no extra fee for any number of connectors. You only pay per database. So if you have 30 application servers and 3 database nodes, then you're paying for 3 licenses. Does that help? Does that answer the question? Wonderful. All right. So if no one else has any other questions, again, I urge you to reach out to any of the people you see here, Eero Tirakorpi, myself, Eric M. Stone, Robert Noyes, the VP of Sales, and my very tight comrades, Matthew and Chris. We are very happy to serve you. Thank you very much for attending, and I wish you the finest of days. Goodbye.